Good morning. Welcome aboard Pride of Baltimore 2 Coffee with Captain. This Saturday, what day is it? The 5th of December. We have a
December already. Yeah.
We have a blustery day here, and well, the cold front's gone through. Plenty of rain, now plenty of wind. Jeff Crosby, Chief Mate Jeff Crosby, and I are going to walk you through laying the ship laid up. So every winter we have been laying the ship up since the winter of 1991. So
before we get into that,
yeah,
what have we been up to this week?
winter layup.
What else have we been up to?
Well, you've been working at the galley.
Yeah, I've been working at the galley. You guys will get a chance to actually see that as we walk through. You can judge my progress. It's been a couple of weeks now. We've also been doing a bunch of planning and stuff for the upcoming year. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, we've modeled our first model of the 2021 sailing season. It's a model. It's the first time we laid it out in the calendar. So juxtaposition, like we're thinking in the conversation, well, we can do it this weekend, we can do that weekend, we can do another thing another weekend, and go through the whole summer that way. So now it's been laid out sort of as a ground truthing effort in the calendar. There's a couple of compression points that we're going to have to rethink, but in the meantime, we're looking to do quite a bit of work with heritage areas of the 1812 war that have been designated around the state of Maryland and the lower Chesapeake Bay 1812 war heritage areas. We're also looking at maybe being able to help Blue Nose 2 celebrate their celebration of 100 years since the launching of the first Blue Nose 2. Excuse me, Blue Nose, pardon me. 100 years ago, Blue Nose was built to be competitive as a working schooner, as a working fishing schooner, but also be competitive with the cup, the fishing cup that was going on between the United States and Canada. So maybe in August, if Canada will let Americans come, we'll be able to go there. So that planning is ongoing. Of course, also, how are we going to do with the public? How is the public going to receive us, too? But we'll be sailing. The symbol of Maryland, the sailing symbol ambassador of Maryland, is going to be sailing next year. So you'll be able to watch her both in real time as well as virtually, because we've got a lot going on, as you can see with Coffee With. But let me go back to history now. This ship was built to go year-round. The mission was year-round. But then things changed. And in 1991, we did the first winter layup. And that set up a set of dominoes that relate to preserving a vessel rather than just tying it up and walking away for 4 months. And a lot of us in the wood boat world understand this, but we're sharing with you how we think about it. One of the things is, of course, the cover. Shed the rain, shed the sun. Actually, the sun came later. Shed the rain came first, because we used clear plastic when it started. We learned later that that wasn't as beneficial to protecting the ship cosmetically on deck as well as general drying out, so we used the white plastic. But then cleaning out the boat down below. Not only do we down rig and take ashore, but we also, actually we don't take ashore, not then. We put the spars all over the deck.
Yeah.
All of our spars this year are ashore, and we've been able to do that only in the last, say, 8 to 10 years. Otherwise, they were on deck, either on deck, on blocks, or on sawhorses, and we do all the maintenance on deck. But we've been able to spread out here at the compound that we have access to. So anyway, clean out down below. Everything's open, so you'll see that when Jeff takes you through. But ventilating is another thing. We used to be able to passively ventilate during the winter, but when we've had these long-term layups all through the summer, we need to force air, because otherwise we develop mold down below. And another thing, wetting the deck. Right now we've had some rain, so there's a little bit of water, but twice a week we're going through the process of completely soaking the deck and then also later on putting on a sodium water dilution, sodium borate solution for migrating into the areas the water can go to prevent any growing going on. So then there's maintenance, just plain maintenance, and also redoing things. So the galley is being redone to some degree. It's not completely redone. We don't need to do that, just one area. So the philosophy of caring for the vessel is you can't just walk away. I'm dealing with keeping an eye on systems that are critical, the electrical storage, battery system. Batteries take care, you can't just leave them alone. There's a system for making sure the propeller and the shaft doesn't eat each other up, because there's a voltage that can be created between harbor water and different metals. We have a bronze propeller, we have a stainless steel shaft. So these are all things that can contribute to creating a current, and that would eat the metal up unless we have a sacrificial metal, and keeping an eye on that voltage, because if we get too much voltage, it'll cook the wood. So it's a really complex world when you get into the details, so we're monitoring that. And like I say, Jeff's going to show you around. So I'll be here to answer questions. That's the thing. Hey folks, if you got a question, we're going too fast, or there's something you'd like to get more detail on, please comment a question. Be sure you do, because otherwise we'll read that and we'll be able to break off and answer that question. So, Jeff?
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
So when the boat first laid up, it wasn't here at this facility. So we're at a facility that is shared with the Maryland Port Administration. Where did the boat lay up the first time?
We were over near what we know now is Harborview.
Okay.
So nearly next door to the Rusty Scupper is an old building. I think it was built in World War II, but it might have been pre-World War II, called the Propeller Building. And they did a lot of, it was part of that whole shipyard, Bethlehem Shipyard maintenance facility that goes down Key Highway from where Rusty Scupper is all the way to where our offices are, over towards, not quite all the way to where the fire truck, emergency city truck, maintenance facility is. So there was a series of docks, and one draying dock and a couple of floating dry docks, pre-World War II and going through, and for a while after World War II. So we were able to just moor up there with no particular thing. So that's why everything came down onto the deck. Anything that was down below, we were able to go to a storage area. So there was a lot of schlepping going on in the truck, and then take the sails over, that sort of stuff. Eventually we migrated over to next door to General Ship, which is a shipyard on Key Highway, and we were able to have a warehouse within literally a shoehorn toss away. So that worked very well. We could actually bring everything into a shop. We've been here since the winter of 2004. Except for the winter we spent in Europe, because the mast fell down.
That's great.
So,
Which we've had that conversation.
yeah, right, yeah. So take it away, Jeff.
All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to start kind of walking through the boat by heading up forward here. So you'll follow me. By the way, the person behind the camera is Patrick Smith. Say good morning, Patrick.
Good morning.
So coming up forward here, one thing you'll notice is there's this giant rope that's hanging along the cover here. That's actually our anchor hawse for our starboard anchor, and we pull that out and hang it up so it doesn't collect moisture and grow things and turn into a nasty pile of rope. So we hang that up here. Kind of the very first compartment of the boat, all the way up here. You want to come up close, Patrick. You can see there's a fan that's pulling air through there. This is called the forepeak. If you want to shove the camera in there, it's a little bit dark, but normally we keep things like fenders and other docking equipment up in this space. There's also an emergency rudder if for some horrible situation happens with our wheel, we can pull the worm gear off and attach a rudder. You can see that red pipe there. That's the emergency rudder. So this is kind of the tiller, sorry. This is the first compartment of the boat. So if you're doing a boat check, this would be the first thing that you check to see if there's any water ingress. Those of you that have gone sailing with us during transits would be familiar with this process. So next we're going to go all the way back aft. Follow me. And as you can see, our small boat chasseur is not on board. It's actually ashore right now. Has a lean-to built over it. We have all of the deck boxes emptied out, sitting on the aft cabin top here, propped open, and it's all about getting that airflow. We have our trash pump also pulled out of its box so it doesn't collect moisture. Basically, any door hatch that we can have open, we have open to allow a lot of airflow. So let's start the process of coming down below. So here we are in the aft cabin. I like to refer to the aft cabin as the brain of the boat. This is where the captain sleeps, the mate sleeps, the second mate sleeps. It's also where all of our navigation equipment is and all of our communications equipment. And as you can see, if you look down here, all of the sole boards are pulled up to allow that ventilation to flow. And back here we still have some stuff in nooks and crannies. It's the things that we really don't ever want to leave Baltimore without. So we just leave it on the boat. But for the most part, we offload as much as we can off of the boat. So Pat, it's a little bit messy with the captain and I rummaging around over the winter trying to answer questions. We oftentimes create chaos, and when we don't have a crew on board to follow us around, it can get a little bit chaotic. So normally this would be where our navigation laptop is with a screen to display all of that. Normally we have an SSB and a GPS up here, a radar and radios up in this corner, but as you can see, we've disconnected all of them and brought them ashore, as well as most of our charts. We do keep Chesapeake Bay charts on board at all times, just in case. And let's keep on moving here. So those of you that are interested in the guts of a boat, if you take a look down here, we have a black water tank. That's where all of our poop goes from this head. Right here. These are new as of a couple years ago. We switched from a manual pump head situation to a vacuum flush head situation. It's a lot more efficient, so we don't have to pump out our tanks as frequently, and it's been a pretty good transition. This metal tank here is one of our fuel tanks. This is our aft fuel tanks, and Pat, if you can kind of like shoot in there, you can see there's a prop shaft in there. We've got a big blue fan that's pushing air down into the bilge to help keep things dry. You come over this way, you can see another prop shaft. And this is the captain's cabin. So this is where a lot of the decisions are made, both passively and actively. Pretty decent sized bunk. Everything is all opened up to create that airflow. And there's a lot of documentation and things in here that we also just don't take off the boat because we don't ever want to be without this documentation. But pretty spacious, which is good because Captain Miles is a pretty tall guy. And Patrick, if you take a hard right, this is one of the mate's cabins. So this is the starboard mate's cabin. Fair amount of storage, pretty decent bunk size. But as you can see, there's also, every little panel that we can pull out, we pull out. And a lot of this is so we can get to things like these through hulls right in here and make sure that those are functioning and shut those if we need to. You can see mattresses are gone. Everybody's stuff is gone. Then we get to come all the way over here into a little bit more tight of a corner. This is the port mate's bunk. A little bit more squishy than the other side, but also not too bad. As you can see, I can almost stand up in here. Not quite. I can fit in this bunk. I have had this cabin before, but it's pretty comfortable. As you can see, once again, we just have everything opened up for airflow. And this is our 12-volt reserve battery system here. Lives under the mate's bunk. So unfortunately, they don't get to shove clothes or shoes in there. But it is essential gear for the ship. Down through here is actually where our water maker membranes are. Got a flashlight here. You can see them, they're kind of tucked underneath what is a bench. If you go around to the other side, you'll see it's a settee bench there. So water maker membranes tucked under there. We try and use as much space as we can, as efficiently as we can. So trying to fill up all of the corners leaves a lot of these bigger spaces open for storage that needs to be readily accessible. In here is what's known as the flag locker. Currently nothing in it, but normally this is full of flags, and by full of flags I mean absolutely full of flags. We have quite a few different flags. We also have different variations, sizes of flags, like the American flag and the Maryland flag, and lots of pennants. So moving on forward here, we are into the mechanicals of the boat. So this is the engine room, easily identified by the engines in this room. We have two Cat Diesels, 3304s. They've recently had a touch-up job, so they're looking pretty decent. Over here, we have our 24-volt house battery bank, and that's new Lifeline AGM batteries. Just behind that, you can see our inverters. We have two Magnum inverters that are working in series. They're helping each other out. All of the information for monitoring those comes into this little black box that Captain Miles is standing next to. So when Cap is talking about those numbers, this is some of the numbers that he's watching, telling us what's happening with the battery bank and what the inverters are doing with the battery bank, because they're maintaining it, charging it, and then we also do a process of equalization, which is kind of like a stress test on the battery. If you look over this way, this is where our generator is. So when we're sailing and not running engines and generating power, we can run a generator cycle to help top up our house battery bank. And then all of this kind of stuff right in here is the controls of those water maker membranes. So we have a couple of different filters as water comes in to filter it before it hits those membranes. You don't want to go directly to the reverse osmosis. That's a good way to shoot through membranes. So we do a bunch of pre-filtration and then run it through the reverse osmosis, and then there's actually a UV filter as well that is good at taking out different viruses and bacterias. This panel here is the AC panel. So AC, when we're plugged into shore power, comes through that transformer into this panel and then is distributed to inverters and elsewhere throughout the ship. And then this panel over here is our 24-volt panel, where most of the 24-volt circuits are. There's also another panel back aft that splits off of this to run 24-volt and 12-volt. This whole system right here is our does two different things. It's our bilge manifold system, so we can pump any bilge in the boat by throwing different valves. And it also is hooked up to our firefighting system. So we have what's called a PTO, or a power takeoff. We have one on each engine. So that can take seawater and shove it through these red pipes here to our fire hoses, and we can fight fire with it. It can also act as a pump, so we can pump water out of a bilge using that PTO and out of the boat. And that's this whole manifold system. So theoretically we could pump bilges and fight fire at the same time, though I don't want to be in that scenario. Doesn't so. Yeah. So moving on forward here, if you've been paying attention, you may notice that most of these compartments have some sort of hand pump. So we like to hand pump all of the bilges. The hand pump for the engine room is right here. That helps us monitor how much water ingress we have coming into a specific compartment. The hand pump for the aft cabin is actually in the head there. If you had a keen eye, you would have seen it against the bulkhead there. But yeah, come on up forward here. Now we are in the main salon area. So if you've been on board, especially if you've been transiting, this area looks quite a bit different than it normally would. Some things in this area, more mechanical wise, right underneath Patrick here is our water tanks. So these, they're steel or aluminum?
Stainless.
Stainless. These stainless tanks here are freshwater water tanks. We have 2 of them. In between there is the head tanks for the bathroom, or the head, that is right behind Patrick. Pat, if you want to go shut the light, turn the light on in there. This is a bit of a project at the moment. As you can see, this is the shower that has a toilet in it. So we have a sole board that needs to be replaced in this area here. That's a project for the next couple of months. So we'll be putting a new sole board in there, reinstalling the head, and finishing out the shower. We actually replaced a lot of the shower surround, would have been during the short sailing season we had this spring. We never got to the point of actually putting a shower head in. So we'll finish that out before we start moving people on board. Great. And then we have these guest crew cabins. So we have 3 guest crew cabins down below. We have all of the sole boards for the midships area shoved into this cabin here. Oh. And as you can see, we've got the dry sink pulled away from the bulkhead. We actually have, that's the back side of the bilge manifold there. There's a covering plate that goes over the top of that. We have that pulled away so that we can get ventilation, air moving around in that area. There's also zincs that go into that system, so we can swap those zincs out or pull them if we need to. So coming back over here, this is a what we call the sail locker. It normally has our storm trysail, storm jib, awnings, and other miscellaneous sail stuff shoved in here. We have all of that pulled out. That's ashore in one of the containers. And what is in here is all of the mast wedges for the mainmast. You may notice that they're pretty close to the mainmast. We do that intentionally because when we bring these ashore, they get mixed in with the Forbus mast wedges, and then come springtime when you're trying to put all of these mast wedges back in, it becomes an absolute nightmare. So to make it as least confusing as possible, we keep them close to the masts that they need to be accompanying. In these areas here, this midships bilge area, we have quite a bit of storage that gets filled when the sailing season begins. So this bilge here, normally full of souvenirs, hats, t-shirts, stickers, pins, whatever thing Patrick has decided we should sell that we get and bring on board and shove into here. This bilge right on the other side is where we have ship's linens, so sheets, pillows, pillowcases, towels, sole towels, as well as dirty laundry as it goes from clean to dirty. This is where we store all of that. Moving up forward here is where we have a lot of our signage and other kind of souvenir information that gets stored up there. And on the right side, that varies depending on what we're doing for that year. Sometimes it's extra tools, sometimes it's extra food. This one is a little bit of a flexible storage bilge. But normally these are all full of stuff, so we offload everything at the end of the year and take it all out of there. This cabin here, the port after cabin, as you can see, has a whole bunch of plumbing supplies in here. That typically stays on the boat. It's one of those things that we found if we remove all of the spare parts, a lot of those spare parts don't get put back on, especially if we have new engineers or new mates. It's better to leave the spare parts in the spare parts section. So this is spare plumbing and plumbing supplies in this cabin, but as you can see, it's opened up as much as possible to keep that airflow moving. And if you come on board for a guest group transit, I promise you, you won't have to sleep with the open containers of plumbing supplies. It's a lot more cozy. If you guys have any questions about anything that you're seeing as we walk through, just make sure to leave them in the comments and we'll address those. So this cabin here, which is emptied out, is typically referred to as the carpenter's cabin. So you can see there's a bunch of storage under the bunk there. We put tools in there, a lot of hand tools, a lot of electric tools, so circular saw, sanders, chisels, fasteners. We have actually one fastener container here that I've been using in the galley. All of our bronze fasteners.
Shiny.
Yeah, that's. But we take all of the tools off the boat because we do a lot of projects off the boat. It also kind of gives us a chance to reorganize and take a look at what tools we have and what tools we want to bring on. So unlike spare parts, tools do need to be gone through every single year to see, what's good to bring with us, what's a little bit overkill, and what needs replacing. Because sailing around in the middle of the ocean with some of these tools is pretty hard on tools. Salt water and tools don't necessarily mix. So coming into the rest of the galley here, we have a companionway that goes up to deck. This is main salon table. It looks a little bit different than when we're underway. All of the cushions and things are pulled off. If you want to come this way. So one thing that you may not have seen if you've got sailing with us is how much food storage we have. So all of these spaces in here underneath the settee bench are for food storage. And once again, we've gone through and thoroughly emptied them out. These ones we actually clean out pretty well because we store food in them. And we don't want to leave any crumbs or things behind. That's a good way to get ants, and a boat with ants is not a great boat to be on. So we open up all of that and let that sit for the winter. At some point, we'll come in and put some new finish coats on the table here and throw some paint around in different spots. These two bilges here, the starboard bilge is usually referred to as the hose bilge, and that's because it has hose in it. We'll take spare hose. We're super creative with our naming, I know. We'll take spare hose, put that in there, and that's for the engineer when they need to replace different sections of hose, whether it's Blackwater hose or PEX plumbing or whatever it may be. We like to carry extra so we're not having to run to the hardware store, or if we're in the middle of a transit, we can fix it underway without it becoming a huge inconvenience to the crew. The bilge next to it, this port bilge, is often referred to as the wood bilge. You'll never guess what's in that bilge. It's normally just wood, extra wood for the carpenter to be able to fix the boat. We try and carry a different variety of things. So the boat is built out of a handful of different woods. So Douglas fir, white oak, and mahoganies are tropical hardwoods. And I pack that bilge as full as possible with big pieces, little pieces, and everything in between, because you never really know what's going to need a little bit of love throughout a season. So it's better to have it on hand than wish you had it. Bilge moving forward to that is what's known as the cleaning bilge. Once again, super creative, full of cleaning supplies, and full of cleaning supplies. Bleach and Windex. We use a lot of Windex on all of these wood surfaces. Gloves, sponges, paper towels, all of that good stuff. And these two bilges up forward of that are food storage bilges. And this is more for like canned goods, stuff that you want to have on hand but you don't need super accessible. The stuff that's underneath the settees is a lot more accessible. So things like your pastas and whatnot, that'll often go down there. This is more kind of deep storage, quote unquote. And if you take a look over here, we have a pantry, so things like produce and your onions and your potatoes and stuff that you want to have super on hand. That's where all of this goes. It's up in this pantry. That right there is actually a pantry fridge. It used to be nicknamed the Rotter. It has now been renamed the pantry fridge. And I believe Captain Miles has shared this story before, the Rotter story. There's a spin on the words rotary air. but it also would, instead of making it cold, would heat up that space and then would just rot out all the produce. We have since come a long way with technology, and that's now an actual pantry fridge. So it no longer deserves the nickname rotter. It is an actual pantry fridge. If you go over in this direction, you'll see the cook and engineer's cabin. They share a cabin during the season. And as you can see, everything's opened up. Got to get that airflow moving through. And as we're leaving living spaces, we bleach our way out of it, and then we use what's called a Formula B, and that's from Practical Sailor. I don't know if you guys are a fan of Practical Sailor. And it's a mold preventative cleaner that we make in-house. And that's been super effective at both cleaning and preventing things from growing. So now we're to the galley. So this is what I've been working on for the past couple of weeks. The galley has a refrigerator and a freezer built into the countertop.
Are these new, Jeff?
Yeah, so these handles are new. They don't have all their fasteners in them at the moment because I pull them out to build up finish coats, as well as these hinges. Used to have top-mounted kind of D-handle and hinges here, which became kind of an inconvenience for the cook with a cutting board because it wasn't a flat surface. So those are now gone, and we have this system. But we have, so the freezer has these two cold plates in there. Refrigerator has one cold plate in there. And these have been updated over the years.
So somebody would like to know, what is the recipe for Pride's Kraken Blood metal polish?
There is no recipe for Kraken Blood. It comes from a company called Boyer Company. You have to call them in order to get it. And it comes in a gallon jug because we use a lot of it. But it is the best brass polish that I've found. There are some others that are pretty equal to it, but as far as getting it in the quantity that we want and its effectiveness, it's been really great. So we distill that down into our own containers that are labeled Kraken Blood because it's hilarious. So this section here, I just replaced. So I replaced this countertop, put in a new sink, and so this is my ongoing project. I had a volunteer take home this cabinetry here. We did that cabinetry, painted it, varnished it. It looks really awesome. The doors look amazing as well. Shout out to Mark if you're watching. And while the countertop was out, I actually took the opportunity to replace a bunch of the plumbing for the sink while I had a lot of freedom to do so. And that's generally kind of how boat projects go, especially in the wintertime. If you open something up, you kind of want to do as much as you can in that space before you button it all back up, because it just makes it a lot easier. You can see the compressor for the freezer and the refrigerator over there. Oh. Yeah. And normally there's a hand pump for the sink right here. That's the system that we use for that. So as you can see, I have a couple more months of sanding ahead of me. And we have two different stoves. We have a diesel stove and a propane stove. Diesel stove for the colder times of the year, so spring and fall. It runs 24 hours a day, and it has a flame inside of this flame box here. That'll always be going. You can show that there. So it has a diesel flame. It's a great tool to cook with, but it's not so great in the middle of summertime because it's always generating heat. So we have this propane stove. This lifts up here. It's a 5-burner Force 10 propane stove, and that helps keep the galley cool in the summertime. Shutting all my stuff and things. Something that you normally wouldn't see when we're all together during the sailing season. As you can see, our hot water tank. We actually have 2 hot water tanks. We have one hot water tank that services the midships area here and the forecastle, and then we have another hot water tank back aft for the folks that live back there. All right, so let's keep it coming this way. Normally we don't keep anything down there, but we do have it opened up for the winter and a fan in there to help keep that air moving. So this is the wonderful land of deckhands and crew. So deckhands and the bosun sleep up here. We have 7 bunks, so we have a double bunk here, double bunk there, and one athwartship's bunk, which is affectionately referred to as the cave. Seems a little bit squishy, doesn't it? But, as a matter of fact, I fit in there quite comfortably as a 6'4" individual. So it's not as bad as it looks. So Patrick has found where we keep the wedges for the foremast, right next to the foremast, because of what I mentioned previously. And if you look directly underneath Patrick, this is the black water tank for the head that he's currently standing in. So if you've been keeping track, we have 3 heads on board. We have one up here in the forecastle, one midships, and one back aft. So we have 3 separate holding tanks for each of those heads. And all 3 of them have been upgraded from the manual heads to these maxi flush heads, and they've been pretty wonderful. But it's a fairly spacious head. When I was a deckhand on board, I always had some problems fitting into the shower. As you can see, me standing next to it, it's a pretty tight fit. So oftentimes we do what's called Navy showers. So you get yourself wet, and then you shut off the water, and then you soap up, and then you turn all the water back in and rinse yourself off. So in the soap up process, I would oftentimes use this whole space. I would just put a towel down because it is a little bit tight, but it's workable. There's a couple of different kind of closets for crew members to stow their winter jackets or their what we like to call monkey suits, which is a tie and blazer and button-up shirt for charter events and dockside events where it warrants that type of dress. Moving up forward here, so oftentimes all of this area we carry spare line, and quite a bit of it, this bilge is normally packed full of spare line, and the bilge right behind Patrick there is oftentimes full of extra shore power cables and other wiring in case we need it. So our shore power extension cables are there, and just a lot of extra engineering cabling. So these are generally full when we're underway. Typically speaking, this bunk up here is the bosun's bunk. It's kind of the largest one of the suite, so it's a pretty decent bunk. And then looking all the way forward up here, we've got our chain locker. So you can see our chain, anchor chain, we leave that in here. You can see this giant box here. So if you remember the very first thing that I started with, that anchor rod, all of that anchor rod fits into that box. And boy, is it super fun to get in there. It takes a little bit of time, usually 3 people, one feeding it down, one helping the person that's in the box, and the person in the box is in the box with a mallet, packing that anchor rod in there. And that happens every time we use it as well. We need to repack in the anchor rod that we use. The other things that we keep up here are our dock lines when we're not tied to the dock. We also keep spare dock lines in here. We keep fenders up here, sometimes our roving fenders. We keep gangway gear, anchor lights, and anchor ball. Those actually never leave the ship. That's one of those things that you never want to leave the dock without, so it just stays on the ship forever. And some other miscellaneous stuff that we keep kind of hanging all the way around here. We don't set anything down. This area can get a little bit bouncy when we're in a seaway, so everything up here is tied around as opposed to just laying in some sort of fashion on the bilge there.
It's a wonderful sticker collection, Jeff. Can you tell us about it?
Oh, these have just been collected over the years by various deckhands coming in, and this area hasn't been repainted yet, so it still has some residual stickerage. Kind of goes in waves. Every 10 years or so, when something gets completely refinished, all of the old memorabilia comes up. There are some exceptions, and you'll see a couple of those in a minute here. And one thing to note, this looks pretty open, and it is pretty open. Normally these sea chests are on the sole here, which makes it kind of a pain to get into these spaces. You actually have to pull these sea chests up and move them out of the way. But when crew are living here, it's a lot more kind of comfortable atmosphere, and everybody has their own privacy curtain, just like this. And what's the saying, Patrick?
I'm not saying it.
Curtains are soundproof. So your curtain is kind of your barrier between the worlds. It gives you a chance to read when other people are sleeping, or watch movies, or listen to music. And let's head up this way. This is where we keep propane for that propane stove. The box on the other side here is our diesel day tank. So we'll keep it full of diesel for the diesel tank. And I have one more space to show you in this back half here. So this space here is what's known as the Lazarette. It's fun to get into. Let me just give me this guy. And this is where we keep all of our paints, paint supplies, sandpaper, maintenance supplies. You can see that it's divvied up into a bunch of compartments, has some shelves for keeping things. It's recently been repainted. It doesn't normally look this nice. There's another bilge down here. And as you can see, this is one of the things that has stuck around since the construction of the boat. This is a handprint from the first bosun of the boat. You can see he was a pretty large dude. Captain Miles,
Hello.
can you tell us a story about the first bosun of the boat and his handprint?
Annapolis fella. Went to high school from Annapolis. Tall, young, robust fella. He was part of the rigging gang for setting up the ship. And came aboard for the maiden voyage as bosun. And I don't know how he got it. As a very young child, the nickname was Kabooby.
Oh, okay.
So Kabooby has his initials, I think, carved up high in the cap of one of the lowermost. Just for fun, he puts his handprint there. And it's been a honor to keep it there.
Yeah.
He's since married, has kids, and living in Maine. But anyway, yeah. So we have an alumnus that trails back to the first vessel in some cases, all the way through the 32 years that Clyde 2 has been crewed up.
And has literally left his handprint behind.
So after that is open.
Yeah, so if you take a look here, we also open up the wheel box here. Normally there's a lid that goes on here, a lid that goes on here, but we want to keep that airflow moving everywhere that we can. So it's a pretty cool perspective. As Patrick runs around to the other side. Boy, is that a lot easier than a tiller. So I think I have one last thing to show you, and that's going to be on shore. So Pat, why don't you come with me? So since we've been at this property, and as Captain Miles mentioned earlier, the last 8 to 10 years or so, we've had the ability to take the spars off the vessel as we downrig. So we build a temporary structure. And that structure is known affectionately as Sparlandia. So if you come out here, you can see Shot Sir under its little winter awning. In these containers is where we keep a lot of our stuff. So all of the rig is in container number 2 there, as far as like blocks and rope, things of that nature. Container 1 is more stuff that we want to make sure it doesn't get wet. So safety gear, electronics. Container 3 is general purpose, literally nuts and bolts, tools, spare rigging supplies, things of that nature. And the final container, which is behind the dumpster there, is all engineering related stuff. So this Kwanzaa hut is made out of PVC wood and tree crack. Shows Sparlandia. And as you can see, all of our spars here are shoved all the way against the side. Normally this wouldn't be the case. In a normal winter season, these would be laid out in this whole space so we can get to every corner of these spars to be able to refinish all of the varnish, redo paint, take a look at all of the leather, especially on the gaffs. So a lot of times these will wear through in a season. So we'll want to pull this leather piece off and put a new leather piece on, you know, checking the leather of the jaws here, repainting everything. But as you can see how dusty they are, they've been sitting in this corner for a while. So we kind of freed up this space to use it as more of a workshop for the year, since we're going to be laid up for so long. But it's become a really awesome kind of multi-use space. Every single spring after we pull the rig out and start putting it up, we use it as a workshop. Every fall before we move spars in, we use it as a workshop. So it's been a really nice temporary space to be able to get out of the rain, a little bit out of the wind. Yeah. Why don't you take a wander around there, Pat? We have a cannon that's actually being rebuilt by Jerry, who volunteers over at Fort McHenry with the Fort McHenry Guard there. He's redoing this cannon carriage. Painting, a lot of painting. Got some varnish projects down the pipe. Got a free bicycle. Anybody need a free bicycle? I'm just kidding, it's not free. That's David's bicycle. He'll be coming on for this winter. I have the sewing machine set up. I had some sewing projects like the awning for Chasseur earlier this summer to do here. So this creates a nice workspace. It's an old Singer. Want to see the sewing machine? Yeah. It's been pretty great. This is the old motor that I burned the clutch out of earlier this year, so I replaced it with an electrical servo, and it's been absolutely wonderful. It's really given new life to this old machine. And those are our cannons. You can see there are 3 that are still on their carriages, 1 that is having its carriage loved. So I want to thank you guys for joining us this morning. I hope you enjoyed the wander around on Pride when she's in her layup mode. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and we'll address them as time goes on, or send us an email. Send Patrick an email. If you guys are looking for Christmas gifts, go online, pride2.org. We have t-shirts, we have hats, we still have ornaments. We have ornaments, some really awesome ornaments. So feel free to check that out. And thank you for anybody who donated. That helps keep these shows going. And Captain Miles, do you have any parting words for us?
As always, stay diligent.